you know, over the last 20 years, technology has really meant software. You and I could start a software company this weekend with a concept, a credit card, and some caffeine. Like we could get something launched and off the ground. And that's been that way for a long time, for decades now. And the playbooks for technology in that area are already very well written and very well understood. And that's nearly the exact opposite with deep tech. You have this kernel of technology that developed in a research lab or, in the dreams of a PhD that potentially has breakthrough capabilities. But that technology has to go on its own development cycle.
Welcome to Deep Dive, the podcast where we will explore the ins and outs of managing deep tech products. I'm your host Ravi Sundaram, and we'll be talking to product leaders about the intricate and innovative process of transforming cutting-edge science and technology into products that shape our future. Join us as we learn from these industry-leading experts on how to turn groundbreaking scientific discoveries into tangible real-world experiences. Today, it's a real pleasure to have Mike Harmon, founder of Hardtech CMO, joining us. Mike is a veteran startup executive, and he founded Hardtech CMO to provide consulting and coaching services to help early-stage deep tech companies grow. Mike's career includes over 15 years of leading VC-backed startups and over a decade of experience as a strategy and commercialization consultant for a wide range of tech-forward clients. With this wealth of experience, Mike has been instrumental in helping deep tech companies navigate the complexities of bringing their deep tech products to market. Today, we'll explore another aspect of product management critical to ensuring success post-development, that is, going to market. We tap into Mike's in-depth expertise on the subject and learn about how to think about messaging along the product development journey, before and after going to market, how to think about product messaging and advocacy during long development cycles in deep tech, and how to leverage partnerships along the way. We'll grasp the nuances of the best practices, the common mistakes, and potential obstacles to sidestep. Mike, real pleasure. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ravi. I am excited to be coming to you from my new offices at M-Hub in Chicago, which is the place to be if you're interested in hard tech or deep tech here in the US. My office is literally located between a space logistics firm and a next-gen ingredient developer. So I am surrounded by innovation aimed at big problems, and it's just a great place for me to launch my business.
That sounds so awesome. I mean, ideas must be just coming out of everywhere in that space. So brilliant, great to have you here, and we're keen to learn from your experience. So maybe we can start by sharing your story with our audience. Maybe you can tell us your motivations behind starting this effort after years of growing several companies. Maybe you can give us an overview of the services that you provide and where you focus in terms of go-to-market strategies, especially in the space of hard tech, deep tech.
Sure, and thank you for the opportunity to do that. I've spent about half my career inside technology-focused companies as the first marketing person hired. So building the marketing and commercialization function within the organization from the ground up as these companies are going from 0 to 1. So I don't have a ton of experience going from, 10 to 100, but I have a lot of experience going from 0 to 1. And that's a different game. And it's a pretty hard game, but it's also a pretty fulfilling game to play. Typically what that means is you're building a product, you're raising money, you're developing IP and securing that, you're building progressively functional versions of your idea and finding either pilot partners or potential customers. And that's not something a lot of people have done. And I've done it a few times, including examples in both med tech and deep tech. When in addition to that experience and being able to advise or lead projects or serve as a fractional CMO, if you will, I also am a certified executive coach, which allows me to give my clients a greater sense of focus and also helps them see that they're working on the right things at the right time and the right way. As we'll get into later in the conversation, I'm sure, commercializing deep tech is way different than commercializing, software, for example, which has really dominated over the last 20 years.
And that's I think you hit the nail on the head there in terms of commercializing deep tech and its challenges and opportunities. Of course, it's quite different. And as product managers in the space, we deal mostly, if not all the time, in that 0 to 1 space, because post that you're getting closer to a more traditional product management, although it's still way more involved. So no, absolutely looking forward to learning from your experience in the space. So maybe we can touch on the last bit that you said. It's different in deep tech, and a different approach is needed. Why? And what are some of the key factors to consider when we come up with strategies, especially when it comes to really new 0 to 1 products in emerging technologies?
Sure. Well, over the last 20 years, technology has really meant software. You and I could start a software company this weekend with a concept, a credit card, and some caffeine. Like, we could get something launched and off the ground. And that's been that way for a long time, for decades now. And the playbooks for technology in that area are already very well written and very well understood. And that's nearly the exact opposite with deep tech. You have this kernel of technology that developed in a research lab or, in the dreams of a PhD that potentially has breakthrough capabilities. But that technology has to go on its own development cycle. And one of the things that folks, when they start getting interested in deep tech, run across the concept of the technology readiness level, TRL. And, that basically takes, from the kernel of a concept through prototyping, through, the different gates of progress to a sold product. And that actually serves as a very useful model, not only for the development of technology, but also the development of the commercialization approach relative to the stage of technology. And therefore, it's a much different playbook. In the early stages of a deep tech company, from a marketing standpoint, I tend to want to see customers in that early stage focusing on story, really helping people understand what it is that you're developing, why you're developing, and what the impact is going to be. Branding and messaging, and honestly, I would tilt more on the messaging side than investing a lot in brand identity. But really understanding and communicating what it is, what you're about, what you're changing, who you're for, and who you're not for. And then also things like that pay dividends a lot later on, like thought leadership, preparing yourself for thought leadership, doing things like these podcasts, being active on LinkedIn and other communities where you can start to establish yourself as the expert that you are and develop a community that can amplify the work that you're doing by virtue of engaging in that space. And then last is a little bit of a clip from the software playbook, but it's stakeholder management. So CRM has been a really popular tool over the years. I started using it in 2001, back when Salesforce was just a web-based sales automation platform. And I firmly believe, especially in the early stages of a deep tech company, that there's great institutional knowledge to be captured and great institutional discipline to be developed by leveraging a CRM type tool to manage all of your stakeholder engagements. So whether it's conversations with funders, potential employees, potential partners, you name it, you can start to capture that information and have that be the source of truth for a growing enterprise.
There's already so many things that you've shared that is absolutely relevant and tangible for our audience. If I may repeat some of the learnings. So message the vision rather than create a brand, and its impact. I've noted that you said impact quite a lot, so that's absolutely the case. Stakeholder management via CRM, and then invest in thought leadership, even though the ROI of thought leadership might not be so apparent in the beginning. You encourage your clients and everybody in deep tech to actually invest in it because of the presence that you build against the vision that you articulated. Um, Anything else that comes to mind that I've missed?
Um, one of the things that does routinely come up in my work is, consider in investing in a coach. Someone who has the ability to help you discover the truths about yourself and your business. Because oftentimes that's where founders and founding teams, they can get stuck in their own heads, and it's not their fault. This is a complex game, and it's super
Sure.
ambiguous, and it can be a little anxious at times. And
Mhm.
so, whether it's an advisor, a mentor, a friendly investor, or a coach, getting surrounded with folks that are interested in what you're doing and can help you um, navigate the space and bring the best version of yourself into the office every day.
That's sage advice again. Having somebody in an advisory capacity with a focus of growing the business, so that who's not in the weeds is what you're saying. Could actually bring tangible benefits. That makes
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense.
I had a great conversation here at MHub
Mhm.
last week with an entrepreneur that is developing some really cool deep tech technology, but I mean, it's super, super early. And just in that conversation, I was kind of laying out the future for him in some areas related to commercialization that I could tell that he had started to think about,
Sure.
but I was able to, just because I've done it before, was able to just kind of say, I can see around this corner and I can see around this corner. I can't see around that corner, but
Sure.
this is what's coming. And you could see some relief and some enthusiasm, come on his face and in the comments that followed, because it was just, someone who had been down a path that he was a little concerned about, that he couldn't quite suss out for himself.
Uh, and that seeing around corners is something that is absolutely critical, especially because in deep tech we are dealing with extremely long development cycles,
That's right.
and it does require founders and early employees to really get into the weeds and start getting to the next technology readiness level. But in such cases where development cycles are long, which is often the case in deep tech, how would you advise people go about messaging their vision? I've read about your moonshot manifesto, for example. Maybe you could tell us more about that framework.
Sure. The Moonshot Manifesto is really just a story to inspire people about your concept and its impact, that it's going to have, right? And so
Mhm.
at the early stages, you've got somewhere between, pixie dust and a partial prototype, right? That's
Sure.
it,
Yeah.
and a vision and an enthusiasm. And, you have to sell the concept to get people to rally around you, whether it's another engineer on the team or an investor or a partner for a pilot or something along those lines. And, I see in deep tech, there's obviously a lot of scientific founders.
Mhm.
And what I notice is their fallback, their default is to retreat to this parade of facts, right? Things that they know.
Mhm.
And they don't focus enough on the implications, and they don't really lean on telling stories. And it's not their fault, right? It's just like when you come from a scientific background, there's so much rigor in the science itself. It's a very rare individual that also has an appreciation for storytelling and messaging, right? Like, I'm the worst scientist that you're going to, interview on your podcast, right? But I'm a really good storyteller. And I think that that's where the magic happens, is when you're able to partner um, you know, great scientific achievement and innovation and then a way to communicate it in such a way where it's not hype, but
Sure.
it is enthusiasm. And one of the things, like, there's one really great question that deep tech founders and teams can ask themselves to help them message the right way. And it's, what becomes possible when? So if you ask that question, what becomes possible when we achieve milestone A, then you're able to reset the vision. And, you've got this big overarching vision that you're trying to accomplish, but you can communicate it in sort of bite-sized chunks, that here's what we're trying to do from, point A to point Z. But within these, we've got these milestones, and this is what becomes possible when. And it's just a really easy, simple question and framework for teams to chew on while they're thinking about how they communicate their relevance to the world.
This is amazing. Having been through that journey myself, from being a scientist to launching products in different markets, that question is so profound, and it does bring out the storytelling framework out. So if I may harp on that a little bit, it's so powerful. What becomes possible when essentially translates into your stage gates and milestones that would then unlock the next level of development and towards your product. Maybe can you share a couple of examples that have stuck with you of good what becomes possible when stories?
Yeah,
If you can. Yeah.
I can fall back on my own career, particularly with a company called New Current, which specializes in wireless power technology.
Mhm.
And we specialized in multiple modalities of wireless power transfer, from Qi to high frequency to NFC based and so on. And there are a lot of places where you can take that technology, but within those specific modalities, some are only good for certain product types, and some are, just flat out impossible with
Mhm.
different product types. And so I got really excited about a technology that involved power transfer using NFC. So you could have power and data off of an NFC chip. And
Mhm.
for small space constrained devices, that was a real game changer for a number of reasons. And so, one of the things that we were looking at from a roadmap standpoint, we actually started evangelizing the idea of wireless charging via NFC before it was available on a chip. We knew it was coming. We knew it was bound to come. And we were
Sure.
willing to take the risk to say, hey, when this happens, this is what's going to unlock. You're going to be able to eliminate connectors on these devices that are the number one point of failure for devices, and also have a data channel that can help you do debugging in the manufacturing stage, and loading software and things like that, right? And so we
Absolutely.
took that risk, right? We took that risk. We challenged ourselves to imagine the future, and we took that risk, and we started building content about it. And guess what? 3 years ago, I did a webinar on expressing that that phones were going to be able to do reverse charging of
Mhm.
small devices. And guess what? We now live in a world where Android has just announced that they're doing that. So there is some boldness that but you have to have some conviction, and you have to have good relationships in the industry with analysts and manufacturers and chip makers, and like, we had those things, and because we did a lot of the things right in our stages of development, that we could kind of point to center field and say, this is going to be a home run, and we're going to hit it.
Brilliant. So if I may again translate, essentially your messaging was your product would really take off when this kind of wireless charging took off, and you had the conviction to say, because of your contacts in the market, to really build that story around that vision. This is a great example uh, of essentially articulating a scenario which would really accelerate your product adoption.
Yep, that's correct.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Digging a bit deeper into messaging strategy. Um, we just spoke about this what becomes possible when framework that would appeal to investors or your executives for investment if you're in a larger business. Are there frameworks that people can use to tailor their content, for example, for investors versus potential customers, or even the general public or
Yeah,
others?
you make a great point. It's just an immediate thing to latch onto is one of the traps a lot of entrepreneurs fall into, especially technical ones, is, they're focused on a lot of times raising money,
Mhm.
and getting investors to buy into what it is that they're trying to do. And as things progress, they tend to sort of lean on that content, which is aimed at investors, which is not what you want to tell a customer or a partner, right? The investors want to see a large addressable market and want to see possibly multiple segments within there because that's going to produce, a return. At least that's been my experience. Whereas, a customer really wants content that's focused on their issue, their industry, their problem. And so the way that I address this with the companies that I've been in and with my clients is, and it's almost embarrassingly simple, but it really, really works. And it's to start with a series of questions, like an FAQ, right? That need to be satisfied about your product and your business. And many of the high level questions apply to businesses of all types, right?
Mhm.
But then you have sector and market specific questions that need to be addressed. So you create a list of these questions and you start answering them and like really working on the language so that it's clear and just as importantly, consistent, right? That consistency of message really, really matters because, you know, everybody's heard that, you have to get a message 8 times before you really remember it. And so not only do you want it clear, not only is it important to have it clear, it's to share it consistently over your social platforms, via email, on your website, on your podcasts. And so that's super important. And within these questions, many of them address the motivations of funders, many of them address the motivations of the market. And once you have those shaped, and again, if you need to work with a professional who's good at messaging, good at writing, good at language, you know, find that. And,
Mhm.
there are people out there who are really, really good at that. But once you have those, then you have essentially little stories, little vignettes or slides that you can have that say, I'm going to tell you about this story, which is essentially an answer to one of those questions in the FAQ. You build this library of stories that are in the form of, Google Slides or PowerPoint or whatever. And then you've got this library. So now, Robbie, you've got a 5-minute competition pitch, right? Let's pull the 7 best slides for that. You've got a 30-minute podcast. Let's pull the 12 best slides for that. And so it's really kind of simple, but not a lot of people do it.
It is a very powerful way of working. It's almost it's as we say in many businesses, it's actually working backwards from your endpoint, from your customer, whoever that may be an investor, be your partner, be your customer, or be the press. And the exercise that you've articulated in thinking about and writing answers to frequently asked questions really gets you thinking from their perspective, which then comes out. And then if you turn those answers into slides or into content or into press releases, you're addressing those questions and almost speaking to that audience, which is so powerful. So that, indeed, simple yet very effective way of getting content to talk to your audience directly.
Yeah, I was having a conversation here at MHub with a founder who is in the med tech space. She's got a really interesting idea called Curvia, and it is a diagnostic tool for cervical cancer. It's a wearable diagnostic that really changes how quickly and accurately those diagnoses can take place. And she's got a pretty decent library of content. And we were having a conversation, and I asked her, I said, what's the toughest question you've gotten today? And she told me, and it reminded me of this conversation that we're having now, where it's like, okay, anytime you get one of these tough or difficult or interesting questions, that's a signal that says, hey, that's a story that we're not yet telling. Maybe we know the answer, maybe we have a good answer, but we're not, we just need to add that to our catalog, to our
Absolutely.
playlist, and say, okay, that's great. And so I encourage everybody to, keep an ear out for those tough questions, or those questions where you might fumble around a bit, because it's an indicator that there's a message that needs to be developed.
That's again a very interesting way of taking those tough questions and using it for better messaging moving forward. So paying attention to those, keeping them in your stock, that's great advice. On those lines, I've seen many a startup trying to answer those questions or portray their answers to those questions in a way that's not genuine to what their beliefs are, just to get the answers out, and therefore not hitting the mark in terms of messaging. So what would your advice be to founders or product people or early stage companies or large companies on finding that unique voice that brings out the most genuine messaging? Because in today's world of content overload, the genuine voice is what stands out in my view. Any advice on that?
I do agree overall with the importance of that genuine voice. There are big cultural differences across the world that, are reflected or represented in some ways differently to different audiences, right? And so what is authentic in one part of the world may seem overblown or overhyped in another part of the world, right? We in the US are probably the most guilty of that, right? But, the importance is that authenticity. And, my experience has been that most technical founders, scientific founders, are actually very wary of overselling their technology. And my hypothesis is because it's ultimately on them to deliver whatever they say is going to happen, right? And so they're immediately like piling pressure on themselves. And so I think there's a tendency to kind of undersell, especially compared to their US-based counterparts in the software world, right? That is a hype machine. And so, I do help my clients, again, that what becomes possible when framework just really allows them to free up some creativity and possibility while still recognizing the reality of what needs to be developed. But I think, hopefully, like, great founders have humility, and great founders know what they're great at and what they suck at. And in the event that there's an area, particularly around the story, because I believe, and granted, I'm biased, but your story, especially as an early stage deep tech company, your story matters just as much as your technology. Because if you don't have the story, who's going to care?
Absolutely.
You got to get it across of what the possibilities are. And so, I think that is, it's okay if you're a brilliant scientific technical founder and you struggle in the areas of messaging, but that doesn't mean you should be lousy at messaging. You should find somebody who's capable of understanding and embracing what you're developing, and then making that accessible to the audiences that matter.
And knowing your strengths is absolutely the key here, and building your team to complement your weaknesses with the strengths of the right team is absolutely critical. But I very much see the point that you made about technical founders relying very strongly on their deep knowledge of their technology or product in messaging, while the same thing can be a double-edged sword, because they're not going to the lower TRL of their technology kind of inhibits the ambitious statements to be made, because the safety of knowing the technology and how it progresses kind of inhibits that vision, which might not be the right story or the best story to tell because investors and others are looking for what's the vision. Again, going back to your relying on all right, if the technology is low today, what needs to happen for something to unlock? That's a very profound framework to use. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure, my pleasure.
Brilliant. Let's go one step forward. If founders get to the point where they've got or getting close to a minimum viable product or a minimum functional product, especially in deep tech, it's not quite often it's not apparent to customers that, hey, there's a product that can solve certain problems. So a lot of, especially in B2B scenarios, and there needs to be a lot of advocacy that needs to be done. And I've seen firms not adopting a long-term vision in terms of advocacy and messaging and ecosystem building and partners and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you coach your clients or in your experience to identify established partnerships that can accelerate market adoption once your product is ready to go to market and not start at the point of launch?
Yeah, it's not easy. I've been very fortunate to work at places where I'm the dumbest guy in the room. And, just really, really bright, creative, multidisciplinary folks. And, you get schedule a conference room, you order a couple pizzas and bring in some beer and talk about where this technology can happen in a way where you're not distracted. Your phones are off, your emails shut down, your laptops are closed, and you're like really just talking about the problem and focused on it. And with a group of smart people, you can really start to develop some creativity and what I call a market hypothesis that says, you know what, this technology could be really impactful to, this type of role at this type of company. And you start putting those on the board, right?
Mm-hmm.
And kind of addressing them individually and saying, what are the strengths and weaknesses of this concept? And then prioritizing those and saying, you know what, let's go have some conversations. Let's find some people that meet this profile, that have this imagined pain, and let's go talk to them and see, how this would work. And most people, if they're approached the right way, and that's another aspect of marketing that really, really matters, is finding the right person and then approaching them with a message that says, we think you might have this issue, or we think that if, you had something like this problem might be solved. Would that be true? And if so, would you like to, have a call? So, you have to do the front end work, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not out thinking about things that don't exist yet that are going to solve their problems. They're focused on their problems. And so you have to, bring a lot of creativity, imagination, but in some sort of structured way that says, okay, this is a better use case than this, right? And, this market produces 10 million units a year versus this market that produces 500,000, right? So there's some aspects of it that need reflection and debate and healthy, discussion about which to go after, because your resources are limited, right? You can't go reach everyone. Another tool that we adapted, I should say, from the startup world is the lean canvas. So we would take a scenario like this technology in this type of product and then run it through the canvas. And it would shake out some of these ideas, some of these creative market hypotheses that would say, oh man, we really should have this conversation with them. And then, Ravi, like after you do all that work, and let's say you've got a good hypothesis and you've got a good target at a good company, and you get the call, you have to listen.
Absolutely.
You have to hear what they're saying. You're not selling, you're investigating, right? And the time for selling is later on, right? But you're testing this concept, you're testing this hypothesis, and you're really doing yourself a disservice. You're trying to close a deal when you're really supposed to be getting some validation on an idea.
I think this is extremely profound in terms of both the process of identifying early adopters or even customers that to approach in terms of brainstorming and really prioritizing the kind of customers, because you're right, you cannot reach your entire TAM. It's just not possible at the early stage.
Right.
But prioritizing, and then the last thing that you said, once you do identify the persona that you want to reach, that articulating the fact that this might be a problem and testing that hypothesis by listening and not trying to push your vision there as such. So use that as a feedback. I think that is absolutely critical. One of my other guests in one of the previous episodes said, actually, don't fall in love with your first product, because then you're missing out on a 10x improvement. So this
Mhm.
this is absolutely going in that direction.
Well, it's really the start of a relationship too, right? I
Mhm,
mean, like,
mhm,
okay, I can develop some trust by relating to them and understanding, who they are and what they're about and what their problems are. And like, if you can use that to progress the relationship up. And if you have a good hypothesis type question, right? Well, if that goes favorably, then you've got a leading candidate for an initial pilot.
absolutely.
So, it makes sense to do it. It's kind of like, you don't ask someone to marry them the minute you meet them. You have a progression that,
Yeah.
that you follow to get to that place. And so it's very similar, in the deep tech world.
Yeah, absolutely, and it builds that credibility and that trust, which is the foundation of any good relationship in be it a personal or this customer and business relationship. So
Yep.
that makes perfect sense. Maybe from your experience of doing this for clients as well as for your own companies in the past, can you share a big success where it has worked perfectly and a failure? So I think I'm a big believer in, yes, we learn from successes, but actually we learn the most from good failures.
hmm
So up to you if you want to start with a failure or success, but one example each if
I,
possible.
I, I think I've got one that started as a failure, but based on the learnings produced a success.
Oh, that's perfect.
And so I'm gonna try and stick the landing on that one. We'll see how I do. But again, it reminds me of New Current. We had this really interesting enabling technology to allow wireless power transfer from a transmitter to a receiver.
Mhm,
And for a long time, when at the start of my involvement, was gravitating to these, let's call them convenience features, right? Easier, cord free, more convenient kind of thing, right?
mhm,
And it it ended up, it was more sort of a vitamin product. It made it better versus, if you're
mhm.
familiar with the vitamin, the aspirin, and the
Painkiller.
antibiotic, right?
Mhm,
And so we were saying this will make things better. Well, people weren't spending their days and nights thinking about making products better. They already had problems.
mhm,
And so I mentioned earlier in the conversation, we had two really successful products in industrial handhelds and in wearables. And the reason they were successful was because we developed solutions that allowed them to get rid of the mechanical connectors of the devices that are inside UPS trucks that basically are mission critical for those drivers, right? Well,
mhm,
to recharge, they had a connector in a really harsh environment. And so that beat those handheld computers up. And, the opportunity came to say, well, what would happen if we got rid of those connectors? Well, wireless power is actually the best solution to do that. It will keep it charged, keep this mission critical device going, and also seal it. So, coffee gets spilled on it, or if it gets dropped, or, the shock and vibe from the truck, all that stuff, like, it solved a real problem. And so we were failing in our messaging by saying, hey, we've got this cool technology. Do you want some?
mhm,
It'll make your product more convenient or more interesting or more valuable. Right. And really, what what ended up being successful and continues to be successful is when the technology is aimed at a very known and powerful point of pain. I tell folks in the deep tech world, a good idea will get you to a funded proof of concept, but pain will get you paid.
Sure. Makes perfect sense. Again, a great example of messaging the solution to the customer problem as opposed to what the technology does. I'm a big fan of Clayton Christensen. So you're actually, what you're saying is message the job to be done as opposed to what the technology does. And I often joke, if you can find examples beyond the milkshake problem that he talks about in the book, this is one absolutely tangible example where you've done exactly that.
Well, and then you can replicate, right? Once you have the insight that I'm not doing this the right way, and you say, this is a right way. And so all of a sudden I was on the hunt for connectors, and I found a growing wearable device in the US called Whoop. I've got one on here, and they had a charge while you wear paradigm, which is really smart because it keeps the thing on your wrist. You never detach. And the number one problem, I was researching user sites, Reddit, and finding just these signals about the problems that the connectors were having. And I did exactly what we talked about. I found the head of engineering and I said, I suspect you have this problem. If you were to be, if we were to share a technology that resolved it in this way, would you be interested in having a discussion? That's literally how it went.
Brilliant.
And it seems so simple now, but I know how hard it was to kind of get to that. But that's kind of what I'm excited about bringing to my clients and the deep tech community in general, is a little bit of the been there, done that, save you 6 months of struggling, and really focus on the things that matter at the stage of technology development that you're in.
Makes perfect sense. All these insights. I mean, we could probably do episodes just on each one of these insights.
Perhaps.
This has been absolutely valuable. Well, if I were to ask you one key takeaway or lesson that you would share with folks who are just about starting, imagine a new grad student coming out of his PhD thesis with a tech, or somebody from the industry looking to go in and apply a new deep tech into a new market. If you were going to tell them one thing, what would that be?
Be kind to yourself.
All right.
It's a tough experience, right? The entrepreneurial journey is really, really challenging. And, I would supplement that statement with, surround yourself with capability, especially as a deep tech founder who's likely going to be like a supreme expert in a very narrow area of the world, but an important one as it pertains to the technology, the deep tech technology. Surround yourself with capability. And that doesn't mean like you have to go hire a team of, specialists in everything, but get plugged in to people who are really great at their thing, just like you are great at your thing. So I do think that you need to be always, driven, but also kind to yourself as you go through the slings and arrows of entrepreneurship, right? It is not easy. And everybody says it's not easy, but I'm like, no, wait, seriously, no. I talk to entrepreneurs all the time. None of them are breezing through life. They're all having challenges. And so, I try to spend a lot of time with my coach hat on saying, look at what you have done versus what's not getting done, because there will always be a list of stuff that's not getting done. But if you capture those wins and celebrate those wins and celebrate yourself through having helped achieve those, like that builds momentum and resilience. And so if you do that, and you also surround yourself with capability, whether it's finance or marketing or operations or a highly specialized skill that's necessary to achieve your technology, like find that capability and surround yourself with it. And again, going back to an early part of the conversation, the best way to do that, Ravi, is with a good story, right? That's what's going to
Yes.
bring the moths to the flame, right? You've got to have a
Absolutely.
good story. And if you do that, you're going to attract the capability that you can surround yourself with to solve these amazing problems that, are even harder in deep tech than just traditional entrepreneurship.
What a wonderful way to cap our conversation. I mean, be kind to yourself through the tough, long journey. Surround yourself with capability that complement your own capability, and you do that tangibly by starting with a story that then attracts the right capability, and you start on your journey. This has been fascinating. Before I finish, so I tend to ask my guests some light questions to wrap up. Do you have any book recommendations that absolutely inspired you, or you would inspire our audience? It doesn't have to be just one.
Yeah, the most impactful book that I've read, probably in the last 5 years, I read over the last couple of months. It's called The Anxious Achiever, and it's by Maura Aarons-Melly. And I mentioned the challenges of entrepreneurship, and it can be an anxious experience. And what I love about this book is that it takes the notion of anxiety head on and helps people understand exactly what it is. Oftentimes, it's a signal that you're not doing something that you think you should be doing, and sometimes that's a positive signal, and sometimes that's a negative signal. But this book really sort of deconstructs anxiety, which is in my conversations here at MHub, it's a reality. And to the extent that you can understand it and harness it and use it for good versus having it get you stuck or worse, it's a really, really valuable text on, a really important aspect of entrepreneurship.
I think it's one of the most brilliant suggestions that I've heard in the recent past, because this is an absolute reality with, be it entrepreneurs starting out on their journey, or even in bigger companies, people trying to take out to release or to work on tough problems. Simply the scales of the challenge and the time scale, the time it takes to be successful. Anxiety is an absolute prevalence, and any help to deal with that is absolutely wonderful. So I will link that in the show notes for our audience to read.
Awesome.
Thank you for
Thank you.
that.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Right, an emerging trend in deep tech that is absolutely exciting for you, that you're paying close attention to.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a trend. It would be a trend here in the US. But one of the
Mm-hmm.
things I loved about being on the panel and attending the Hello Tomorrow Global Summit this past March
Mm-hmm.
in Paris was the fact that all the deep tech sectors were represented, right?
Excellent.
Here, it's more sector specific. And I'd like
Mm-hmm.
to see more of that pan deep tech community developing here in the US and get to that stage that it is in Europe. Here at MHub, I mentioned I'm next to a space logistics firm and a new materials developer, right? And like that's
Excellent.
as close as I've been able to find here. But when you think about it, Robbie, whether it's clean tech or space tech or something else,
Mm-hmm.
they are absolutely going to also be influenced by AI and quantum. And when those innovations leverage other innovations, that's where the exponential gain comes, right? You know
Yep.
that probably better than anybody. And
Absolutely.
so that's why I am excited to help advocate for, participate within, a deep tech community here in the US that isn't so sector isolated. And that's a trend that I would love to help be a part of. I don't know if it's happening yet, but one guy's trying, and I'm sure many others are as well.
Well, definitely. Well, at least two guys are trying, although I'm on the other side of the aisle. But absolutely, I think there are learnings across the verticals that could be leveraged, not only not only in the technology helping each other, but actually the frameworks and the way you operationalize these efforts. I'm already seeing trends just speaking to people such as yourselves, and an absolutely great thing to do. So I'm glad that you're in this journey, and hopefully the trend continues.
Same. We need more Ravis.
And Mike's, I suppose. Mike, this has been absolutely. How can people get in touch with you or learn about your services at Hardtech CMO?
Sure. You can go to hardtechcmo.com. That's the website that I have for the business, which talks about the consulting services and my coaching practice as well. And then also content, some of the things that we've talked about today, I've done content on, and some of the things that I'll think about after this conversation, I'll do some more on. So I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn. You'll find me at Michael Harmon on LinkedIn or Hardtech CMO there as well.
So we'll link to those in the show notes so people can find you easily. And this brings us to the end. This has been an absolute pleasure. I've learned so much from this short conversation, and I'm sure our audience will get a lot out of it. Thank you again for taking the time. I wish you the best in your endeavor, and I encourage people to reach out to Mike, whether they need coaching or help with messaging or anything as they're starting out. Thanks again, Mike.
Thanks, Ravi. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
If you like that conversation, please subscribe. You could also engage further by joining the Deep Tech Syndicate Substack and Slack channel via the link in the show notes. You'll be tapping into a network of the brightest minds in deep tech product.